That looks, Schumacher's off. Schumacher's lost time.
Yeah.
Hill goes by.
Oh, out goes Schumacher.
Damon's lost it, has he? Off! They're both off! Just a minuscule slide there from Damon Hill. That will have affected his time a bit, but Damon Hill now moves into pole position with that time of 44.385.
There's nothing in it again, I'm afraid. There's no difference in performance. Michael's right there with us, and we only have a slight advantage. So it's going to be another thriller, I think.
It certainly has all the ingredients, as Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher, who've had their fair share of contests both on and off the track this season, resume their rivalry at Hockenheim. And Schumacher can expect a lot of home support as the reigning world champion attempts to extend his lead in the drivers' standings. He is currently 11 points ahead of Damon Hill, but John Alesi has now joined the title race. Johnny Herbert's victory at Silverstone has moved him into fourth. This is how they line up this afternoon. Damon Hill starts on pole for the third Grand Prix in a row, but Michael Schumacher is right alongside him. On the second row, Hill's teammate David Coulthard and last year's winner at Hockenheim, Gerhard Berger. Eddie Irvine starts from 6th position with Mark Blundell 8th and Johnny Herbert 9th. So we're ready for the drama to unfold. Waiting for us in Hockenheim is Murray Walker.
Well, 2 weeks ago at Silverstone, I said the atmosphere was almost unbelievable. It was positively sleepy compared with Hockenheim. I have never experienced anything like it in all my life. This, as you can see, is a circuit which encompasses a stadium section, which is right at the top of your picture. What you can't see is the two long, virtually parallel legs which disappear off the bottom of your picture and come in again at the top of your picture, which plunge through dense pine forest. Hardly any spectators there, but there are over 100,000 in the grandstands that you can see all around the edge of the track, and they're here for one reason only as far as they're concerned, and that is to see their idol and their hero, Michael Schumacher, the man who has brought Germany to the forefront of Formula One virtually single-handed, win the German Grand Prix. But is he going to do it? Well, he's not in pole position for starters. Damon Hill is there, as you just heard from Sue, for the third time in succession and for the fourth time in the last 5 races. There he is, and Damon and Michael have had their problems up to this race, and of course the biggest was the collision at Silverstone.
I generally would think that in motor racing you always had accidents, and you will always have accidents, and you will always have situations probably like we had in Silverstone, but you have to make sure that they happen as little as possible, and they shouldn't happen between two top drivers.
What do you think about it all in retrospect?
Well, I think that if I'd listened to or believed half the things I'd read, I would never get in a racing car again, but I'm here again and I'm on pole position, and it hasn't put me off in the slightest. I'm still determined to win races and try and win the championship.
11 points ahead in the championship, 9 races left. Are you comfortable, uncomfortable, worried, happy?
I would have been more comfortable with 15 points if I would have won Silverstone. Nevertheless, you can't be comfortable up to the point you know you have the championship in your pocket, and that's going to take a while now. We're very close together. Williams has done a very good car, and we have to push very hard to stay in front.
I'm very happy with the car. I think that we've got a good setup on the car, and that's crucial because it gives you confidence that you need to attack the race with. And but I must say I'm not overconfident about being able to eke out too much of an advantage over Michael, because I think he's shown that he's right there with us and he's got the same horsepower. He's pretty much the same speed on the straight, and he's determined to win in front of his home crowd. So there's a very motivated guy who's very good anyway, who will be trying everything to try and stop me.
It shows up here again that qualifying seems to be more difficult for us than for the Williams team. But it was the previous two races, Magnico and Silverstone, and I don't mind being behind Damon and even another car in qualifying, but run in front of them or finish in front of them in the end of the race.
As long as I keep qualifying on pole position, then I'm proving that I'm quick and able to do one lap quicker than the rest of them. But the crucial thing is winning the race. That's the thing that hasn't happened the last few races, and one thing that I want to put right.
I'm with Damon Hill now. Damon, this is going to be a tough race. It's also a tough audience. How are you going to play it today, tactically or aggressively?
Well, I have to play it aggressively because there's no other way to approach these races anymore. You have to go flat out from the lights to the flag, and we don't know what the other guy is going to do with his pit stops, and we believe we've chosen the right strategy for ourselves, and again, you don't know what the other guy's on when the lights change, so you just have to go flat out.
Fourth this morning in the warm-up. Were there any problems with the car at all?
Yeah, I had one or two problems in the morning warm-up, but so I was not as happy with the car, so I'm slightly anxious for the race.
I know you want to win this race very, very badly, but if you do, are you worried about 120,000 Michael Schumacher fans and their reaction afterwards?
No, well, I'll win the race first and then worry about that afterwards.
Have a good race.
Okay, thanks.
And Damon Hill down there waiting to get into the car and go out on the grid. And there's a lot of things a driver has got to attend to in Grand Prix racing. One of them, of course, is to be able to get past the driver in front. Not at all easy. Let's hear about it from Jonathan Palmer.
Whilst the front-running cars, such as Hill's Williams and Schumacher's Benetton, are very evenly matched, something we don't see much of these days is overtaking. And when we do, it often results in a collision. But why is overtaking so very difficult? To get by the car in front, you need not only to be faster somewhere on the circuit, but to have the space to get by. Through the corners there is only one optimum line, the cars sweeping from one side of the track to the other, leaving no room for a faster car to pass. From the exit of each corner, the drivers are accelerating absolutely flat out until they brake for the next corner. And as their power is virtually identical, so is their acceleration, so again, no chance to overtake. It's only on braking at the end of a straight that overtaking can be seriously attempted. In principle, it's easy. Just don't brake until you're alongside the car in front. But normally, if you do that, you won't be able to slow down enough to get round the next corner, because every driver thinks he's right on the limit of braking anyway. With their phenomenal grip, the cars can slow down incredibly quickly, and braking durations are very short. But Hockenheim this weekend offers some of the best opportunities to overtake, because the long straights mean high 200 miles an hour top speeds, after which the cars must slow right down to 50 for the tight chicanes. Braking distances are therefore relatively long. Even so, the drivers keep their foot flat on the accelerator until just 90 metres or so from the corner, then hit the brakes for maybe only 2 seconds before turning into the chicane. In order to have any chance of overtaking, you have to be right on the tail of the car ahead approaching the braking area, then jink out, preferably to take the inside line for that next corner. You've got to be brave and skillful to keep on the accelerator for perhaps just 1/10 of a second longer, by which time you will have pulled level before hitting the brakes hard and hoping you can still stop in time to make the corner. Just when the overtaking driver has done enough to claim right-of-way is a grey area, but generally he needs to have some overlap on the car ahead before they start to turn into the corner. Collisions and controversy result when this is not achieved, and we had a classic example at Silverstone 2 weeks ago. Through the previous 155 miles an hour corner, Hill was too far behind Schumacher to normally have a chance to outbrake him before the next 65 miles an hour left-hander. Sensing no immediate threat, Schumacher took his usual wide line, though he braked a little early. Damon fleetingly thought he had a potentially unique opportunity to exploit the briefly superior grip of his new tyres and braked maybe just 0.2 of a second later, aiming inside Michael, who turned into the corner unaware of the lunging Hill. Both drivers were then committed, and after Damon locked his brakes in a desperate attempt to stop, he hit the Benetton amidships. The stewards apportioned equal blame, but most experts believed Hill was largely at fault, and if so, it was an admittedly rare mistake at a time of enormous pressure. Often the television pictures will give us a pretty good idea as to who is to blame in an accident. Sometimes the drivers are the only ones who really know. But the chances are that there can never be a definitive conclusion, except that the drivers are sure to disagree.
With David Coulthard now, David, Damon is desperate for points. You're looking extremely good here. Have you asked the team what will be the situation if you're in first place, Damon's in second place? Can you let him through?
As it stands at the moment, we're out there to race. I need to get wins as much as Damon needs to, so hopefully we're in for a good battle.
The temperature, has that affected how you're going to look at the tactics today, i.e. lightness of fuel load on the tyres, etc.?
Well, it certainly affects the way the car will work. We haven't run in this temperature so far this weekend, so maybe the setup will change slightly when we're out on the track. So it really makes a bit of a guess as to whether we're on the right track or not.
Now you like this Hockenheim track as well. It has been good to you in the past. So are you feeling quietly confident today?
Yeah, I felt good all weekend, and I was good in the warm-up with fuel. And, you know, I believe that this is going to be a good day for me.
Have a great race, David. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Well, this is David Coulthard's 17th Grand Prix. He has, in effect, just completed a year of Grand Prix racing, although it's spread over 1994 and 1995, because he came into racing last year after the tragic death of Ayrton Senna, and then he had his season disrupted when Nigel Mansell came back for the last 3 races of the year. Beginning of this year, David Coulthard had an extreme attack of tonsillitis, which slowed him up literally for about the first 6 Grand Prix. So it's only now that we're going to be seeing him at his best, as we did in the British Grand Prix, where he finished in 3rd position. And now here he is in 3rd position on the grid. And when I tell you that there is only just over 1/10 of a second covering the first 3 on the grid, you'll realise how close it is. And there is Johnny Herbert, who has had a colossal increase in his self-esteem, of course, since winning the British Grand Prix 2 weeks ago.
Johnny Herbert wins the British Grand Prix, and you can see how popular his victory is. He's a lovely chap, and he richly deserves it.
It was nice to get the first win out of the way, and it was nice to do it at Silverstone, which proved, I think, that I could win a Grand Prix, and if you're in the right place at the right time, something like that could happen. So it was good it happened, and I think for the second part of the season, I want to show that I'm a lot quicker than I've shown so far.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, and they said they think one of the problems you may have is that before you have been, with respect, with a minor team, with Lotus, and now you're very much with a number 1 team. Is the atmosphere, is the psychology different when you get inside?
To be honest, I don't think that's such a big issue. It's a big team and everything else. Now, I've come into a team where they've got the current world champion. He's been here for 5 or 6 years. He's got the car to how he likes the car to be, or designed around how he likes it. And it is a lot different, as I think a lot of people know how he does drive. And it is then very difficult trying to, change your style, I think, is probably the wrong way of doing it. It's trying to adapt to how the car is. Yeah, it's the normal thing. I've always, gone on for a couple of years saying, I think I can win a race and do well and this, that and the other. But now I've actually achieved it. I think inside it gives me a hell of a lot more confidence with my own ability. So I think from that point of view, I can do a much better job now, because I do feel more confident with myself. And say if I can get this testing in next week, I think I can then grow for the second part of the season, and I think I can do be a regular contender for the top 3 spots.
We've just managed to grab Eddie Irvine before he goes and jumps in his Jordan Peugeot. Eddie, 6 on the grid. You must be happy with improvements you've made this weekend.
Yeah, it was a circuit that we didn't quite know how we were going to go, and we've been strong all weekend, both cars, so that's pleasing. It's a power circuit, and the Peugeot's obviously got plenty of power.
This Hockenheim track, you like it? Got a good feeling about today?
Yeah, I have. The last time I finished a race here, I won it, so that'll be quite good. The start's critical, the first lap's critical, because we're doing such a high speed, breaking into slow corners, so anything can happen.
Well, last year Häkkinen took you out. He's quite close to you again this year on the grid. Are you worried about that at all?
Yeah, when you make a beside you, you have to say, you have a chance of not getting past the first corner, but you just got to do your own thing, and if he runs into you, and you have to walk away.
Eddie, have a good race. Go get some points. Thanks.
Thanks.
Well, very quickly, let's just run through the situation of the top 9 cars on the grid, because 5 of the drivers of those cars are British. Damon Hill in pole position, of course, in the Williams Renault, in which he's already won twice this year. Michael Schumacher leading the World Championship, and only 0.08 of a second behind Hill on the grid. David Coulthard in the second Williams Renault on the grid in 3rd position. The Ferraris have been frankly disappointing here. Gerhard Berger, who won last year from pole position, is 4th on the grid, but he's had a lot of problems with his engine and with setup, including the warm-up here this morning, in which Michael Schumacher was fastest. But a superb performance from the 2 Jordan Peugeots, Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine, that you've just heard from, 5th and 6th on the grid. Mika Häkkinen and Mark Blundell, who are 7th and 8th on the grid, have a new Demon Mercedes V10 engine built by Ilmor in Brixworth, and that is very powerful indeed. And at one point in qualifying, Mika Häkkinen was quickest, and Johnny Herbert 9th on the grid. But as ever, 2 experts here, 2 experts today, Jonathan Palmer, of course, and Martin Brundle, who's taking a 1-race sabbatical from the Ligier team before he makes his dramatic reappearance at Hungary, and Aguri Suzuki is going to be driving the car here. But Jonathan, what about tactics and prospects?
Well, it's always going to be important, and it is so here at Hockenheim. This is a 45-lap race, and whether or not the team stop once or twice or 3 times depends, of course, on a number of factors, but including the rate of tyre wear and just how quick the cars will be with different weights of fuel. Now, I think what we've found here is that tyre wear is not too much of a problem, and the tyres will certainly last at least half distance. So I think we're going to see 1 stop as being the norm, and that's probably going to happen around about lap 21, lap 22 of this 45-lap race. There aren't too many faster corners on this circuit, and it's the faster corners that tend to penalise a heavier car. But really what we tend to see is a bit of a cascade reaction, and Damon Hill is of course on pole position, and I'm sure that we're going to see him start with half a tank of fuel to do just a 1-stop strategy here, and Michael Schumacher, starting on the 2nd position, is going to be starting on the right-hand side of the track, and that's the dirtier side of the track, and therefore I would think Michael will be very well aware that there is quite a good chance that he will not actually be able to get away ahead of Damon. He'll have to follow Damon. He won't be able to make as good a stop because he won't have the grip, and therefore what he won't want to do is to have a 2-stop strategy and risk having to follow Hill along, because whilst overtaking is not as hard here as it is at some other circuits, it's not easy. He won't want to risk having to follow Hill along and to have the penalty of making 2 pit stops without having the opportunity to make up ground. So I think we'll see the same approach from David Coulthard. He too won't want to lose ground, and I think he'll start with half a tank of fuel for just 1 stop. Those 3 are going to have, I'm sure, a really superb battle. So far this year, we've seen Damon Hill start off the season being dominant, and then Michael Schumacher, quite frankly, has outpaced Hill and the Williams for the last 5 races, and we need to see a change on that, really, from Damon and Williams.
Minutes to go, 24 to start in the German Grand Prix around this 4.2-mile Hockenheim circuit, a lot of which you can see now, but most of which you can't. But needless to say, the cameras will be showing us every inch of the track. And in pole position on the grid is Damon Hill for the 3rd race in succession, for the 5th race this year. That's an indication of how hot it is here, and the track temperature is 42 degrees. The cockpit temperatures will probably be about 50 degrees. Schumacher is 2nd on the grid. There's David Coulthard, who is 3rd in the 2nd Williams Renault, ahead of Gerhard Berger, the fastest of the 2 Ferraris. 5th and 6th, the 2 Jordan Peugeots of Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine. Then Mika Häkkinen
and Mark Blundell in their re-engined McLaren Mercedes. Johnny Herbert is 9th, Alesi is 10th, Frenson in the Sauber Ford is 11th, and Olivier Panis in the Ligier is in 12th position, and his teammate for most of the rest of this year is going to be Martin Brundle, who is right here with me. What do you think of the prospects, Martin?
Well, picking up on your comment, Murray, about the track temperature, I think that the weather could throw a double six into this afternoon, in that it's far, far hotter than at any other time over the weekend. And I think with that 43 degrees centigrade, anybody who's got a slight imbalance in their cars, i.e. understeer the front sliding or oversteer, the back end of the car sliding on the throttle, I think we'll be in big trouble. The tyres are going to go away quicker than they imagine. It's been very overcast and cool all weekend. They may not have all the information they need for their pit stop strategy. I think Hill and Coulthard have the best car on the circuit, and if Damon gets a good start, I think he'll be difficult to beat this afternoon. The two Jordans have been looking strong all weekend. I don't know how strong the engine will be here on this. This is traditionally a very, very hard circuit for engines. Häkkinen's grid position doesn't represent his speed, I believe, and he could well be a threat after 5 or 6 laps. Alesi will be worth watching. He's clearly going to be frustrated with his 10th spot on the grid, and watch out for him on the start, I would imagine.
Well, just to throw a wild card in, although let's hope it doesn't happen again this year. Last year, 11 of the 26 cars which started were out of the race almost before the first corner. A multiple crash at the back of the grid, nobody was hurt, and then at the front, Mika Häkkinen attempted an impossible move to get past David Coulthard's Williams, sliced across the track from your left to your right onto the grass into the barrier, and took out both the Jordans, Mark Blundell. There were 5 cars involved in that. So this is going to be a race of attrition. You've heard how hot it is. 45 laps of this 4-mile circuit are going to be very, very tough indeed. The long straights mean that they build up to 200 miles an hour in 3 sections of the course, and then have to brake very hard indeed for 3 chicanes. One on the out leg, one at the top of the course where the out leg swings round and joins the return leg, and the 3rd chicane is on that 3rd leg. So the engines take a very, very hard time indeed, especially remembering this heat. The same thing applies to the brakes. And of course, the drivers themselves are going to be very much overheated in the cockpits. Damon Hill, pole position. Well, Damon has been subject to a lot of criticism in the last few days, and there was even a story that the Supremo of Formula One, Bernie Ecclestone, had said that Damon faced a life ban if he got involved in any more incidents like the one that occurred at Silverstone. Well, I can only tell you that I have talked to Bernie today. There he is with Frank Williams, and he's categorically denied that he meant any such thing. And we should also remember that not only was Damon Hill castigated by the stewards of the meeting, but so were Michael Schumacher, Mark Blundell and Rubens Barrichello, and those last 2 were involved in a separate incident. So hopefully that's scotched that one. And there are the men who we expect to make the running, Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher, followed by Gerhard Berger in the Ferrari and Coulthard in the Williams.
And pulling away now from the start and finish straight. This is not the longest straight by any means here at Hockenheim on this very different circuit. It's a very high speed circuit. They're now coming onto the main straight out of the north curve there. And that was where Häkkinen caused the problems last year, coming down into the first chicane. They're going to be doing 200 miles an hour, maybe 205 coming into this chicane, then hard on the brakes, right down from 6th gear to 2nd gear into this 60 miles an hour right left. And at the moment, of course, the cars are just warming up the tyres, but warming up the brakes as well, getting everything in optimum form, ready to take the race start. Now they're going to be accelerating up through the gears, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, weaving from side to side there to get some heat into the tyres. You wouldn't have thought that would have been a problem with 42 degrees of track temperature, but these cars need to run with tyres at around about 90 degrees of temperature. Now this is the Ostkurve chicane here, and we've seen it's seen its fair share, or more than its fair share, of drama during the qualifying sessions, with cars going wide and going off into the gravel traps there. That used to be a one fast corner, a 170 miles an hour corner all the way through there. But there you can see the first 3 cars. There's Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher and David Coulthard behind, and these 3 I think are going to be pulling out quite quickly from a gaggle of 5 behind, which may well end up being led by Gerhard Berger, with then the 2 Jordans and then the 2 McLarens after that. It's going to be a 2-group battle, I think, to start with. Now at this point, Damon Hill's going to want to, just see him glance in his mirrors there. He just wants to be sure that he's not too far ahead, because what Hill doesn't want to end up doing is to have to come onto that grid and stop for any longer than he has to, because these cars only cool when they are going forwards. They have no fans to cool the engines or cool the radiators, and therefore they can overheat pretty quickly. And I'm sure they're all aware too that the start is going to be absolutely crucial. There are going to be 2, to my mind. Really, there's some flares up in the air there. The grandstands are absolutely full of enthusiastic fans here. Been firing fireworks all weekend. Now this is the stadium section. 3/4 of this circuit is just fast, long straights. In fact, 3 one-mile blinds. But the 3rd quarter and the final quarter is this section. It's called the stadium. It's very twisty, and that means that it's quite a challenge, because the cars are all set up for low downforce configuration to make them as fast as possible in a straight line, which makes them very, very slidey indeed through this section.
Well, we don't know what the fuel strategies are going to be. We don't know whether Damon Hill is stopping once or twice, nor do we know whether Schumacher is going to be stopping once or twice. For what it's worth, I suspect that Schumacher is going to be stopping once, but we'll know soon enough. And I remind you that this is a 45-lap race. Damon sitting patiently on the grid now as they peel off one by one to take up their allotted grid positions. 24 cars and drivers, the last of which, Giovanni Lavaggi, is an Italian 37-year-old who's replacing Bertrand Gachot in the Pacific team, and he's managed to qualify, albeit 12 seconds off the pace. And now those engines will be really hot. Let's hope there's a quick getaway. Let's hope that it's a clean start, not like last year. So watch for the lights as usual, the red, the green, and then it's go. Hill on the right. Green. Hill is away well. Schumacher is second, but who's going to be into the right-hander at the north curve? It's Hill, Schumacher, and then the rest of them come pouring through. David Coulthard has held his 3rd position. Now it's up to the Jim Clark curve. Right, left, right. They approach it on a flying lap at some 200 miles an hour. It's down to about 65 miles an hour. It's still Hill leading, Schumacher second, Coulthard challenging. The Ferrari of Gerhard Berger is still in 4th position, followed by the 2 Jordan Peugeots, and then it's Mika Häkkinen in 7th place. So there's no changes on the first 7 on the grid as they come up to the Ost curve. Right, left, right, 55 miles an hour at the slowest point. And it's Williams, Benetton, Williams, Ferrari, Jordan, Mika Häkkinen, and Johnny Herbert has made 1 place. He's moved up from 9th to 8th position in the 2nd Benetton as Damon Hill weaves, and that's one of the Tyrrells off the track, and it was Mika Salo out of the race already on the 1st lap. And the Finnish driver, has been his first drivers, and Mika Häkkinen has got past Eddie Irvine, so he's up to 6th position. Into the stadium for the first time. And look at the crowd as they come in. When you see them, they're roaring, they're waving their flags. They would have waved them a lot more if Michael Schumacher had been in the lead, but it's Damon Hill, and he's pulled away quite a bit already. Now, this could be a reflection on the fuel strategy. It could mean, and I don't know whether it does or not, that Hill is stopping once and Schumacher's stopping twice, but it's early days yet. Lap 1 completed. Hill, Schumacher, Coulthard, and off goes Damon Hill out of the race, and Michael Schumacher takes the lead, and, well, that was, to put it mildly, a dramatic development and an awful development for poor Damon Hill, who started this race 11 points behind Michael Schumacher. Is he all right? Yes, he is, but it's going to be a very crestfallen and distressed Damon Hill, who is out of the German Grand Prix. Here's a replay. He loses it going into the north curve, spins across the tarmac, slides across the gravel, slams into the 4-tier tyre wall, which absorbs the impact, but it will not absorb the shame that poor Damon is going to feel at having made that error. Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, that certainly looks on the face of it as though there we have another look at it there, and Damon has really lost control very early on that corner. Now, on the face of it, we say that was a driving mistake, but it seems odd because Damon is not prone to making mistakes like that. He's not prone to spinning off in the race, and to do so on that very first corner when he had a bit of a lead already on Michael Schumacher, he was obviously pushing hard, but one can't help but wondering if there was some kind of a problem with that Williams. It'd be nice to have another look at it and have a fresh look to see, but it seemed odd for him to lose it unless he lost it under braking. It was almost before he turned into the corner. The back was coming round on that Williams. He may just have locked up the rear end. We should appreciate, of course, that the tyres will be not up to full working temperature, but really after 4 miles of circuit, I think one could have expected them to be not far off that, and it's not really just a simple cold tyre incident.
Well, you've seen it. Michael Schumacher is in command. Coulthard is in second place. Martin Brundle, what's your view?
Damon was pushing very hard on that first lap to try to establish a gap, and rightly so. There is a new patch of tarmac on the way into that corner. It's been there a couple of years now, and it does generate a couple of bumps on the way in just where you're downshifting. If he went in just too deep, you can lose the car there on the way in, but we'll have to wait and see what he says.
Well, whatever, Damon Hill is out of the race, and that will dramatically affect his chances in the World Championship, and it means now that it's all down to the confident David Coulthard, but Coulthard at the end of the second lap, and we're on lap 3 now, was 1.3 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. You can see the visual gap as they come up to the chicane, and it's going to be a very, very tough job for the far less experienced David Coulthard, who's only in his 17th Grand Prix compared with Michael Schumacher's 61st, and there the bitter sight for English fans of Damon Hill's Williams Renault being removed as we come down to the chicane again. Remember, there are 3 of them on this track. Schumacher leading, Coulthard second, Gerhard Berger, last year's winner, is up into 3rd place. Barrichello is 4th, Mika Hakkinen is 5th. Look back, there is the McLaren. In 6th position, it's Eddie Irvine, in the 2nd Jordan, 7th is Johnny Herbert, 8th is Mark Blundell, 9th is Alesi, and 10th is Olivier Panis, as round the left-hander at the Sachs curve, that's about a 60-mile-an-hour long looping left-hander, goes Michael Schumacher, who must be feeling very, very contented and happy inside that Benetton Renault cockpit, knowing that his main rival here and in the World Championship is out of the race. And we join David Coulthard. You can see how far ahead as he goes into the north curve Michael Schumacher is. The gap on this lap is still 1.3 seconds, very little in it. Coulthard, Berger, Barrichello.
Yes, there's no doubt that Michael Schumacher must be feeling pretty confident at this point, because whilst David Coulthard has really shown increased form this weekend, he's been closer to Damon Hill throughout the practice sessions and qualifying. He was only indeed 1/10 of a way from Damon in qualifying, and that's the closest he's been for the last 4 races. And we can see the gap there, 1.7 seconds from Schumacher to Coulthard. I think that psychologically that Schumacher will know that he has the upper hand, even if these two turn out to be pretty evenly matched. In terms of fuel stop strategy, I think at the moment I would still go for, looking at the lap times, a 1-stop strategy for these, and that will mean the first stop around about lap 22. But what a great shame for Damon Hill there, because his start was absolutely superb. He capitalised on the benefits of pole position. He is at the front, but also on the left-hand grippy side of the tarmac, and really shot away. He had no challenge at all from anybody, and he was certainly pushing hard on that first lap. But as I said, it was very uncharacteristic for him to make a mistake like that. He's been involved in 1 or 2 spins in particularly wet practice sessions, but not in the race, and we'll have to wait and see, as Martin said, whether or not there is any explanation from him, apart from the fact that he just, for unknown reasons, lost control trouble on the way in. But also Gerhard Berger there already holding up the queue of cars behind. This was the kind of pattern that we thought may well evolve. Mika Häkkinen also driving with a bit more restraint off the start. He will have been very well aware and no doubt reminded by Ron Dennis of exactly what happened here last year at the start when he scythed across and ended up eliminating 11 cars, or certainly 11 cars were eliminated. In fact, he was banned for a race as a result of that. But Häkkinen really driving with a good degree of aggression, but also controlled aggression. And right behind Gerhard Berger there, Rubens Barrichello, having out-qualified his teammate Eddie Irvine, although the two have been incredibly close, is really harrying Gerhard Berger. We're right with him now. And the problem is going to be that Ferrari is fast in a straight line. The V12 engine, one of the most powerful, is powering that Ferrari to about 205 miles an hour now, as they come now hard down on the brakes into that first chicane there. And there's going to be little, I suspect, that Barrichello can do about Berger. And from Barrichello's point of view and Jordan's point of view at this point, we have to hope that he's also on a one-stop strategy. I'm sure that Berger is only intending to stop once, but I have a suspicion that the Jordans might wanted to stop twice. And if that's the case, Barrichello will be being held up quite substantially by Berger and will be squandering away the benefit of this currently lighter fuel tank.
Well, lap 5 out of 45, 1/9 distance. Here's Schumacher coming towards us. There is Coulthard. You can see that the battle in this race is between these two cars. Gerhard Berger in the V12 Ferrari, Rubens Barrichello in the V10 Jordan Peugeot. And the little Brazilian who started off this season very much overshadowed by his teammate Eddie Irvine has come good in the last few races. The Peugeot engine has been improved a great deal and he's really challenging now, but so is Mika Häkkinen. There is Eddie Irvine, who is 6th, and Gerhard Berger, that's a jump start then. And Gerhard Berger loses 10 seconds plus, of course, all the time that it takes to come in, all the time that it takes to get out. And my reckoning is about 25 seconds as Rubens Barrichello goes up into 3rd position. Mika Häkkinen goes up into 4th position. Eddie Irvine goes up into 5th position. Gerhard Berger is losing places all the time. What a dramatic race this is already. Damon Hill out on the first lap and Gerhard Berger out on this lap 6. Now watch him take the penalty. That's the digital board on the left, the seconds ticking away. The Ferrari mechanic in the background has got the starter in case Gerhard Berger stalls the Ferrari. Out he goes and he's lost a lot of places.
He has indeed, and that's going to provoke a wry smile, I'm sure, from the Jordan pit, because it's been Rubens Barrichello who's right behind Gerhard Berger, who's been the victim of a jump start penalty for the last 2 Grand Prix, and this time he's going to benefit from the system, because Barrichello was certainly destined, to my mind, to be held up by Berger for the next 20 laps. Now he's going to be able to increase the pace. His last lap was a 1:50.1, so I'd expect to see that now fall as he can move without Berger in front of him. And Berger too is really going to feel pretty disillusioned. I think he had a great qualifying session. The Ferrari has not been good here, as illustrated by Alesi's 10th place. Berger had a wheel come off after a pit stop at Silverstone. He had a poor fuel stop the race before that at Magny-Cours, losing him 40 seconds. He's really going to be feeling pretty dispirited, I think.
And Barrichello is actually lapping faster at the present moment than anybody on the track except Michael Schumacher. But Martin Brundle, if you were there and you were Michael Schumacher and this was the end of lap 5 and you're in the position now, what would you be doing?
Well, I assume he's on a one-stop race. You really do have to wonder whether they would have gone for the safer bet of a 2-stop. You've only got to find 0.6 of a second per lap to make it worth your while. That 28 seconds or so you're going to lose coming in the pits and stopping for some more gas. So I wouldn't be absolutely sure on Schumacher's strategy at this time, but clearly he's easily the quickest man on the circuit.
I think one of the things that applies here is that while Schumacher would only need to find 0.6 of a second, he would need a clear bit of track in front of him to do that. And I'm sure that Benetton's concern could well be that he may be being held up, or may have been held up behind Damon Hill, not as it turns out has happened, and that could have squandered again his opportunity to use a third of a tank and the benefits of running the car lighter. But looking at his lap times, I'm pretty sure he's looking at a one-stopper.
Well, we're on lap 7 now, and it's starting to look like the old story, because Michael Schumacher is over 3.5 seconds in the lead ahead of David Coulthard. You see Schumacher into and out of the Ost curve before Coulthard even arrives at it. Coulthard in his turn is 2.5 seconds ahead of Barrichello, who is 1.7 ahead of Mika Häkkinen. That's his McLaren. And the next car round the corner after Mika Häkkinen is Eddie Irvine. Both the Jordans then in the top 5. Mark Blundell makes the second McLaren Mercedes in the top 6. And if they finish well in this race, it looks as though they will really have started to crack the problems that they've been having all season, both with the handling of the car and with the power and performance of the Mercedes engine. Ilmore have been working away on that. Now you're looking at Schumacher in the stadium, coming through to complete his 7th lap. Long way yet before he comes in, even if he's on a 2-stop strategy. There's the pit lane dotted line, which shows them where to turn in. Schumacher crosses the grid to complete his 7th lap. Now the gap was 3.6 seconds, and David Coulthard goes through, and it's now 4.1. So Michael Schumacher is striding away from the Williams Renault, who in its turn is getting ahead of Barrichello, and it's Mika Häkkinen that we should be watching now, because I think he's closed up a bit on Rubens Barrichello. A big gap between Häkkinen and Irvine, who is 6th. 5th, Alesi is in 6th position, and Michael Schumacher, probably the fittest person in the race, supremely confident with this magnificent package of himself, the Renault engine, and incidentally Renault engined cars were 1st, 2nd and 3rd on the grid again, and Schumacher is in a totally commanding situation.
One of the interesting things this year is how, certainly of late, Damon Hill's been able to put the Williams on pole position, clearly illustrating ultimate pace, but when it comes to the race itself, it's been this man, Michael Schumacher. The combination of Schumacher and the Benetton have tended to have the upper hand. For the first 3 races, it was Williams and Hill who had the upper hand, and indeed Damon would have won the first 3 races had it not been for his spin after he broke the suspension.
Now look at this. This is Jean Alesi, who is 6th. Mark Blundell there, who is 7th. Right behind him, Olivier Panis. So there is a battle, and that's Johnny Herbert behind Panis. So it may be getting a bit strung out at the front, but as Heinz-Harald Frentzen there in the Sauber Ford turns into the chicane, you can see that Irvine, Alesi, Blundell, Panis are very close indeed to each other. Martin Brundle.
Yes, I suspect Mark and Johnny Herbert may have had to come in together. Mark had a very slow lap on the last lap. Panis has now got between them, and Johnny dropped back to 9th. So I think there may have been a bit of touching going on there.
That's Olivier Panis, who finished a very surprising 2nd last year. Such was the decimation in the race because of those 2 start line crashes I told you about, that the Ligiers came up and finished 2nd and 3rd. Olivier Panis was in 2nd position. His teammate Eric Bernard was 3rd. And Jean Alesi in the Scarlet Ferrari, who is in 6th place as Johnny Herbert turns in ahead of Frentzen, is a very disappointed man. He won in Canada, of course, and he is running at the present moment in 3rd position in the World Championship. But his Ferrari, like that of Gerhard Berger, just has not been on the pace at all here at Hockenheim. Combination of engine and handling reasons. Lap 9, Michael Schumacher over 4 seconds ahead now. This quite astounding young man who has already won this year in Brazil and Spain and Monaco and France, and has 46 World Championship points. That's 11 more than Damon Hill. When I was talking to Schumacher in practice, he said he would have liked to have finished the British Grand Prix 15 points ahead of Damon Hill by winning the race, but that was not to be. Well, it looks as though he's going to get his wish now and have 10 more points than Damon Hill, which would give him a lead over the Englishman of 21 points, which would be very satisfactory indeed from Schumacher's point of view.
Following on from my earlier comments there, after the start of the season, Damon Hill having the advantage with the Williams car would have won the first 3 Grand Prix had it not been for a suspension failure on the first one in Brazil. It was then Benetton with Schumacher there who really made very good use of getting to grips with the newly installed Renault engine, and frankly Benetton and Schumacher have outpaced Hill in the races for the last 5 races and would have won all of them had it not been for the odd problem there that beset Schumacher. But Now it's going to be obviously down to Schumacher just to try and extend that gap, not to make any mistakes. He really has got this race in his hand now. You can see that the gap is up to 4.3 seconds. And it's down to probably a factor of reliability. Last year Schumacher dropped out around about lap 20 after he had an engine problem. Still, his lap times to me look consistent with making a one-stop strategy, and that means that that's 12 laps to go. That's about 12 more laps before he's due to come in for his first stop.
And it could well be that when he does come in, then Michael Schumacher is going to be able to get into the pits and out of them again without even losing the lead. And in the pit lane, news from Tony Jardine.
Damon Hill, terribly hard luck. I know you were pushing very hard. Something seemed to give at the back end. What do you think happened?
I can't say at the moment, but I was pitched into an oversteer very suddenly, and I can only guess at what happened. I was not overdoing it, I thought, in the corner, and I changed down into the gear I take for the corner, and I was braking, and suddenly the back end went away from me. It just seemed to suddenly tighten up the back of the car, and I got pitched into an oversteer and went off.
Prior to that, on the lap, the car had felt comfortable?
I was really looking good.
And of course now the championship, I suppose you're gutted.
It's not good, is it? No, it's pretty devastating really for the championship.
Damon, thanks for talking to us.
Well, a very, very unhappy Damon Hill, but that means to say, of course, with his championship chances very much reduced, he's just got to hope that things come better for the next Grand Prix in Hungary. But if you've just come to see the German Grand Prix and you wonder what the situation is, the answer is that there is the race leader, Michael Schumacher, who was behind Damon Hill at the end of the first lap. When they got to the first corner on the second lap, Damon Hill, travelling at some 130 miles an hour, lost the rear end of the Williams altogether. It went across the grass, skated straight across the gravel into the four-tier tar wall. Damon Hill's race was over, and as you probably surmised, he may feel that there was some sort of a problem with the rear of the car rather than himself.
Now we saw a quick glimpse looking at Michael Schumacher of his front wheel locking under braking. Now that's something which has actually happened throughout the whole weekend. It's nothing to be particularly alarmed about. I think probably a reflection of a couple of things. One is the fact that Schumacher is pushing very, very hard, and indeed his style, and one of the reasons that he goes so quickly is that he brakes later than most other drivers, and he goes into the corner faster. So he's more on the edge, he's more near the edge in terms of braking. And the other thing is that the front suspension of that Benetton is very stiff indeed, and that tends to allow the inside, the lightly loaded front wheel, to be more prone to locking. So I think we'll probably see a few more incidents of that, but without the pressure that clearly he hasn't got, it shouldn't be very much. But back to Damon Hill and that Williams incident. What will tend to happen now is that after the race, the car will be brought, of course, back to the Williams garage, and they'll have a good, careful look at it. And normally, if there was any kind of defect on that car, which contributed or indeed caused Hill to lose control going into that corner, it'll be apparent, because it probably will be a different kind of damage to the damage that would have been incurred from spinning into that wall. So until that point till we know that, until they've looked at the car, they won't know whether it was Hill or whether it was a problem with the Williams car.
Well, here's a man with his dander up. It's Gerhard Berger. He's now in 11th place after that 10-second penalty. The man who won the German Grand Prix last year and brought Ferrari back into respectability. They hadn't won a race since 1990. And John Alesi comes into the pit lane, and this is lap 12 in the 45-lap German Grand Prix. That looks like a pretty leisurely stop to me. There's no fuel going in. They're just taking that. He's on. Martin.
Yes, as I suspected, some teams have gone for this two-stop strategy today. It's surprising how everybody's so close in lap times. Right through the top 9 cars are all within a second a lap of each other, except for Schumacher out there in front. But I think you could see several cars coming for 2 stops.
Well, I don't know whether any fuel actually went in then or not. He was sitting having the wheels changed. There was no sign of the filler going in. Then it sort of tentatively went in, only to come out again. And now Michael Schumacher is already lapping people. It's only his 12th lap out of 45. and he has just passed Giovanni Lavargi, having already passed Taki Inui in the Arrows. Damon Hill out. Pedro Diniz was lapped in the 40 a long time ago. So Michael Schumacher is now closing on Roberto Moreno, the Brazilian, in the second 40 car. He's in 18th position, and on lap 12, as Schumacher completes it, and you look again at Gerhard Berger, Schumacher is 5 seconds ahead of Coulthard, who is 3.5 seconds ahead of Barrichello, who is 2.2 seconds ahead of Häkkinen in 4th place. Irvine is 5th, 11 seconds back. Out goes one of the Minardis. I missed the driver. So it's either Pierluigi Martini or Badr. And in 6th place, the second McLaren Mercedes of Mark Blundell. Coulthard now has lapped Lavargi.
Well, I've got a feeling there that Jean Alesi's pit stop took the Ferrari team rather by surprise, because they were still getting a wheel, the right front wheel, out of the garage to get it ready to put on the car. So it might have been that Alesi felt he had a problem with the tyres, but we'll have to wait and see. That would have been admittedly the time for the first of 2 stops, and I think we're probably going to see the Tyrrell team come in for their 2 stops, because they don't in fact have the option of making one. The fuel tank capacity on the Tyrrell has been designed to be round about 85 litres, and that's too small to get through the half distance, and the Pacific cars also will need to come in for the first of their 2 stops. But I think if Michael Schumacher and if David Coulthard were going to do that, they would have been in by now, because it's now the time when the cars are coming up to lap the traffic, and it does indeed look like Jean Alesi's got some kind of problem, some kind of other problem. He's coming back into the pit lane once again, and normally if ever a driver has a handling problem, the best thing to do, the right thing to do, is to come into the pits and put another set of tyres on, because tyres are the most crucial thing in the car. Alesi peels it off, back into the garage, into retirement. It's been an absolutely miserable weekend for Alesi, and quite a blow to his championship hopes, because he was only 3 points behind Damon Hill, and with Hill being out, today would have been a great day to get into second in the championship. But after qualifying a poor 10th, he's obviously had some kind of problem with that Ferrari, and a set of tyres didn't fix it, and it's now into retirement. I would almost be sure that it's some kind of suspension problem.
On goes the remorseless Michael Schumacher, and the retirements thus far are Mika Salo, Damon Hill at that dramatic second lap incident. Out has gone Pierluigi Martini. It was his Minardi that we saw parked by the side of the track. Jean Alesi, and that's little Pierluigi Martini walking in now. I have to say that a lot of drivers may not be too unhappy to see him walking back, because he has a habit recently of getting in the way. That's his car in the background. As Schumacher passes it, he's now on his 14th lap, looking once again very secure indeed, and that is the Ligier of Olivier Panis, who has come in from 10th position. Oh dear. Dreadful start. He's lost a lot of time there. Michael Schumacher is now, as you can see, coming through the chicane on his 14th lap out of 45, and yet another retirement, my goodness, and that is Olivier Panis, the man that we have just seen exiting the pit lane. It's your teammate, Martin. Have you got any views on that?
Yeah, he's going to be sad about that. He clearly had some kind of transmission problem just as he was pulling away. It looked like it bound up on itself. I'd hazard a guess that it took 2 gears at the same time. That is possible on these cars if there's a malfunction in some way.
Well, Tony Jardine somehow or other has got into the Ferrari pit. What's on, Tony?
Well, there's a big muddle going on down here, really, Murray. I've just spoken to Baccini, Senor Baccini, who's the press attaché for the Ferrari team. He's been shrugging his shoulders, telling me there's some sort of an engine problem. The fact is that Alesi has pulled into the garage, but he's still strapped into the Ferrari. They've just restarted it, so he could rejoin the track at any moment. Who knows what's going on?
Well, if you don't, I don't, but let's hope he does get back, because there are getting fewer and fewer on the cars, which is cars on the track, which is something sadly we see all too often at Hockenheim, because as I said earlier on, and as you watch Michael Schumacher, following his usual procedure of locking up at that point and putting a bit of extra wear on the tyres, we need as many cars back on the track as possible. This is lap 15. There's a long, long way to go now. David Coulthard can only hope that there might be a pit lane refueling problem for Michael Schumacher, which is more than unlikely, because the Benetton team are masters of getting in and out of the pit. That's Andrea Montemini in the Pacific Ford, who is about to be lapped by Michael Schumacher, and Montemini is in 15th place.
Well, Schumacher, of course, leading. David Coulthard is now 5.2 seconds behind that. But Rubens Barrichello is only 4.1 seconds behind David Coulthard. And he's been gradually slipping back by about 0.3 of a second over the last 5 or 6 laps. And I do wonder, in fact, whether or not Barrichello is making 2 stops. If so, I would have expected him to have been in by now, or certainly in the next couple of laps, because whilst the Jordans have been going very well this weekend, to go that well, to be within 4 seconds of David Coulthard in a Williams after 14 laps, which is virtually, of course, third distance, I found a little bit unusual. And so I've got a hunch we may see Rubens Barrichello come into the pits in the next 2 or 3 laps. Mika Häkkinen is also going very well indeed on the same count. He's only 2.2 seconds behind Barrichello, while a big gap then back 17 seconds to Eddie Irvine. So maybe Irvine is making 1 stop with his Jordan.
But look at this. This is the battle for 7th, 8th and 9th, and there's the 9th place man. It's Gerhard Berger. Remember, he had that 10-second penalty, and he's caught all that up on Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who is immediately in front of him. That's one of the Jordans in the pits. It is Rubens Barrichello, and Barrichello was just 3 seconds behind Häkkinen, 17 seconds ahead of Mark Blundell, who's 5th in the McLaren. Johnny Herbert, who is leading this battle of 3 cars, is in 7th place, and the order on lap 15 as they come down the straight towards us, some of them lapped, some of them lapping, is Schumacher on his 16th lap, 4.3 seconds ahead of Coulthard. Häkkinen is 3rd, 6 seconds behind Coulthard. Barrichello is 4th. Blundell is in 5th place. Poor Giovanni Lavaggi there is being swamped by cars. This is his first Grand Prix, but he's had the manners and the good sense to get out of the way of all of them and not bulk them. And in 7th, 8th, 9th places, as I was saying, Herbert 7th, Frentzen 8th, and Gerhard Berger attacking the German, turns into the chicane. Gerhard Berger is really flying. He's probably got the red mist now after that jump start penalty he had, and he's going for the Sauber Ford in front of him as Herbert and Frentzen really locking up there as he turns into the chicane. He is in 8th position. And the problem now for Gerhard Berger, of course, is that he is close enough to feel the buffeting from the car in front, and Eddie Irvine is now right up with Rubens Barrichello. So there's a change, and Gerhard Berger goes past Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Martin.
Yes, classic manoeuvre there from Gerhard. He placed the car beautifully, got a good toe, and just had a stab up the inside and blocked Frentzen's turn into the corner. Nice clean move, and he's really making his way back through the field. Schumacher's driving well within himself. He's been on the ragged edge all weekend to get that car on the front row of the grid, but now you can see him really well within himself and staying well away from the edge of the racetrack. He looks very comfortable and very content with his position at the moment.
And Mika Häkkinen in the McLaren is in 3rd place. This is a replay. Look at Gerhard Berger dodging out from underneath the rear wing of Heinz-Harald Frentzen Sauber in the braking area, slides through on the inside, accelerates away, and Berger has gained a place and is up into 8th position, and now he will be going for Johnny Herbert as Irvine, Berger, Frentzen, and Herbert is making progress because he is ahead of Irvine, who is passed by Gerhard Berger. I suspect that Eddie Irvine has got a problem. And now Heinz-Harald Frentzen does the same thing. Does he? Yes, he goes through. And so both Herbert, Berger and Frentzen have all passed Eddie Irvine.
Yes, that's cruel fate for Eddie Irvine because he's clearly got some kind of a problem. He's been losing about 2 seconds a lap for the last 3 laps, and I suspect that he will come into the pits at the end of this. It may be something intermittent, it may be that we'll see him pick up, but certainly for the past few laps his times have been about 2 or 3 seconds off the level that they should be at.
And we are now on lap 18. Here are the retirements. Damon Hill, Pedro Diniz, Taki Inui, Pierluigi Martini. Jean Alesi has retired. They may have started his engine in the garage when Tony Jardine was there, but he's out of the race, as is Olivier Panis. Effectively, therefore, there are 16 cars left in the race, and another retirement I didn't mention was that of Mika Salo, and on lap 18 now, as Michael Schumacher goes through, he's continuing to increase that lead. It's up to 5.1 seconds, and Mika Häkkinen is not making any impression at all on David Coulthard there. So, order on lap 18, Schumacher leads, Coulthard second, Häkkinen third, fourth is Blundell, fifth is Barrichello, sixth is Herbert, seventh is Gerhard Berger, and in eighth position, and out goes Mark Blundell from fourth position. So, does that mean to say that that new Mercedes engine is still not quite right? Because from the smoke at the back it looked as though that was the problem, and with Blundell out it means to say that now Barrichello will move up a place. David Coulthard is safe, Michael Schumacher still leads, and it's soon going to be pit stop time.
That looked like some kind of engine problem for Mark Blundell, but it could have been transmission. The oil, what we saw probably was oil getting on something and burning. That was the smoke, and hard to say. But Mika Häkkinen is really driving an absolutely storming race here, proving that McLaren and Mercedes have made some really clear progress here at Hockenheim. Häkkinen is now just 7.3 seconds behind David Coulthard. We're now on lap 18, and anybody who was going to stop twice would have stopped twice, and those people are Ukio Katayama and Rubens Barrichello. Those are the people who've actually stopped to do a two-stop strategy of any significance, and therefore I think that's clear now that the rest of them, and that includes Schumacher, and there comes Gerhard Berger. They're up the inside of Johnny Herbert there. Berger taking sixth place from Johnny Herbert, and so we've got Michael Schumacher, David Coulthard, Häkkinen, and Herbert and Berger, in fact, who are all going to be on a one-stop routine, a one-stop strategy, and I would expect to see the first pit stops in about another 4 laps. And the people who could possibly gain from this is Herbert and Berger are relatively close. Herbert is 1.2 seconds behind Berger now, but Häkkinen to be just 7.5 seconds behind David Coulthard at well after 1/3 distance, and is really a superb performance and illustrative of really good progress from the McLaren team here.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, and that is that David Coulthard is going to be taking the lead in this race, provided he keeps going, because there is no way that Michael Schumacher, with his present lead, there it is, you can see visually, and in time it's about 5.6 seconds, and there's no way that, this is it, is it? This is either Schumacher or Johnny Herbert coming in. The Benetton mechanics are at their battle stations. The man in the front who's going to lift the front of the Benetton, Steve Matchett, will be lifting the rear. Then the mechanics will attack each of those 4 wheels and tyres, and sure enough, into the pit lane comes Michael Schumacher, race leader, and now I look to see David Coulthard come through in the lead. And he does so now, as Schumacher stops at the pit lane. David Coulthard takes the lead in the German Grand Prix, but don't get too aerated about it, because of course David Coulthard has got to come in and make his stop. An excellent stop by the team there. That means about 90 litres of fuel have gone into the tank. Martin, you've got a comment.
Yes, a peculiar time to stop really. It's just over 1/3 distance, but I assume it is a one-stop strategy still, but it just seemed a bit odd to me.
Well, I'm not sure, because whilst I thought he was going to be on a one-stop strategy, that was only 8.3 seconds of a stop, and to stop that early, he would have needed to have taken on at least 110 litres of fuel to get to the end of the race. The halfway point is another 3 laps, and that's 12 miles on yet. So I do find that odd, and it looks to me, on the length of that stop, that it could be the first of 2, but it was a pretty extraordinary thing to do.
Yes, they could have put more fuel in for the start of the race in order, knowing they were going to do 2 stops, and I suspected that was a great possibility with Michael, but it really they could have carried more fuel at the beginning of the race to make that stop shorter for track position during the race.
Well, it was nice to see Schumacher stop and come in and leave safely, because I cast my mind back to last year and I remember the tremendous fire that Jos Verstappen had in the Benetton team when he came in. But Tony Jardine, as ever, our man in the pit lane, was right there.
Murray, before that pit stop took place, I actually spoke to a couple of the mechanics to see what their feelings were 1 year on after that dreadful fire, as you say, and they said they hadn't talked about it. They'd only mentioned it briefly this morning. They were just hoping to do a good job, and standing amongst them here just on the fringes of that pit stop, they were absolutely brilliant. They were totally unruffled, and it was a mega quick pit stop, so it's life goes on as normal in the very efficient Benetton pit.
Thank you, Tony Jardine. And now Mika Häkkinen from second place comes in, because remember, Michael Schumacher has stopped, David Coulthard is leading. Mika Häkkinen had gone up into second place but will now lose it, and it looks as though they're putting a lot of fuel into the McLaren, which implies possibly a one-stop. But Häkkinen rejoins, and Michael Schumacher will go up to second position.
Well, that's very interesting indeed there, because Häkkinen stopped within one lap, in fact a lap following Schumacher, and yet Häkkinen was stationary for 4 seconds, 5 seconds more, and that was the length of stop, the duration of stop that I would have associated with a one-stop strategy, and that is, I'm convinced, what McLaren are doing with Häkkinen. But equally, it looks to me as if that amount of fuel, with the amount of fuel that went into that Benetton, Schumacher's going to have to stop again.
Well, you may have seen Gerhard Berger taking Häkkinen as Häkkinen exited the pit lane. So Gerhard is driving an absolutely superlative race. He is not actually the fastest man on the track. Michael Schumacher is, with a lap in 1 minute 49.134, which is just about 3 seconds outside the lap record held by David Coulthard. There he is, and he's coming up behind the Tyrrell as he turns into the right-hander approaching the south curve. And the Tyrrell, of course, is that of Ukko Katayama, who has already been lapped by Michael Schumacher. He is chasing the Pacific car of Lavaggi, who he is going to lap. And so there's 3 different drivers on 3 different laps, and Barrichello is out of the German Grand Prix. This is the 7th of the top cars who are out, and now Barrichello, who was 4th when he retired, and Schumacher is making the fastest lap of the race. He's just gone round in 1 minute 41.1 after that stop of his. So Schumacher is flying, and what he's trying to do, of course, is reduce the gap between himself and David Coulthard there, the new race leader, as much as possible, so that when Coulthard comes in, Schumacher will be able to get past him with a clear track, keep on the pressure and pull away from the Williams Renault. That, I'm sure, will be the plan. We'll just have to see whether it's realised.
Now, we've heard so often, and correctly so too, just how pit stops and strategy makes a difference to the racing. And it makes a difference in 3 particular ways. One, the fundamental strategy that you employ. Do you stop once or do you stop twice? Those are the options that we've seen here. The second part of it is just how quick your actual fuel stop can be. How slick can the guys be putting in the fuel, putting on that nozzle, taking it off, and getting the car away from the pits again. And the third part of the strategy is making sure that you use the window of time when you could come into the pits to the best advantage. And by that I mean that it's good to pull your car in just before it's about to come up on traffic, and that's one of the things that Benetton do so well. And that, I'm afraid, we just saw with David Coulthard, was one of the things that Williams haven't been as good at. And if David Coulthard had come in at the end of his previous lap, he wouldn't have got held up behind the 2 cars that he did. And we shall have to see what difference that makes, because his last lap was a 1 minute 50.6. So if we look at the end of this one, after we know that he's had to lap Katayama and Lavaggi, we can see how much time he's actually lost.
David Coulthard there is leading by some 15 seconds. Now it's 13 seconds. Michael Schumacher is flying. There are the Williams mechanics waiting to refuel and re-wheel and tyre Coulthard's Williams. And here he is, still leading the race, but by a decreasing margin, of course. He's on worn tyres now. He's got a very light fuel load, but Schumacher is on new tyres, and he's really going for it. And I'm pretty confident that Coulthard is going to be coming into the pits on this lap, as out of the pits goes Heinz Harald Frentzen from 6th position, into the pits, I'm sorry, Heinz Harald Frentzen from 6th position, and the order on lap 23, half distance, Coulthard leads, Schumacher 2nd, Berger is up to 3rd ahead of Häkkinen, Herbert is 5th, Frentzen was 6th, but now it will be Eddie Irvine as Frentzen exits the pit lane. And Irvine's been into the pits. Here is Michael Schumacher, who is now, I should think, at least 2 laps ahead of Giovanni Lavaggi in the Pacific behind him. Michael looks to me as though he's got it made, Martin.
Well, I think we're going to have to wait and see on this one, Murray, but quite clearly with the new tyres and even with extra fuel, Michael's now absolutely flying, and he's going to make up that deficit if he carries on at this rate, even if he has to make another stop, and I'd put my money on him doing that.
Coulthard into the pit lane, David Coulthard, race leader. Now, I am watching the track while you are watching Coulthard, and you may well see Schumacher in the background. No, you won't, because they've changed the camera angle. But past goes one of the Tyrrell. That's Robbie Tyres, and we've actually got a helmet now. Watch those lights underneath the handle. When they come on, the fuel pressure will have dropped. He will know that now is the time to remove the nozzle. There he goes, and out goes David Coulthard. But Michael Schumacher is back in the lead of the German Grand Prix, and this is lap 24 out of 45. The Benetton Renault leads. And there is the proof.
Well, the evidence is clearly there now. We saw David Coulthard have what is, of course, 1 stop for him. It's exactly mid-distance. As into the pits there comes Gerhard Berger. Now, he should be in the pits also for the same 15 seconds or so, because they need to put on 110 litres of fuel. You can see the wheels are the first things to be done. The air jacks go up in the air. That signals to the man with a lollipop at the front that that particular corner is done. And off comes the nozzle. Well, it's a slower stop, but of course we do know too that the Ferraris use more fuel. That V12 engine configuration is powerful, but it's also peaky. It uses more fuel, and that's one of the reasons why Ferrari are going to a V10 engine for next year. But Michael Schumacher, as we look at him, was only stationary, let's not forget, for 8.3 seconds, and that has to mean that he has to come back into the pits again. So we wonder, why did he choose that strategy? Now, what I believe has probably happened here is that it's easy for us to forget that when Benetton decided what strategy that they would adopt, they obviously thought that Damon Hill was going to be out in front of Michael Schumacher and wouldn't be at all aware, of course, that he was going to have the incident he did. And bearing in mind that Benetton has struggled a little bit in qualifying to try and keep up with Hill, and particularly the Williams team, with Coulthard being so close too, I think they may have been concerned that they might have had to do something a little bit different to give themselves some space, or give Schumacher some space in the race to make up time, to get ahead of Hill somehow. If they both made 1 stop on round about the similar laps, and if Hill had got out ahead of Schumacher again, it might have been impossible for Schumacher to get by. So maybe they've adopted this slightly wild card strategy as a means of getting out of sync, out of synchrony with the Williams routines, and therefore giving Schumacher a chance, as we're seeing now, to put in some very fast laps to try and eke out a gap, to try and pull ahead, so that as and when Hill came in for his stop, or as and when Schumacher came in for his second stop, he was ahead, and he was ahead enough to come out of the pits from his second stop ahead of Damon Hill after he'd made what I'm sure would have been 1 stop. However, we shall never know, but perhaps after the race we shall certainly get the explanation from the Benetton crew there.
I hope that David is paying a little bit of respect to his brakes in his first 5 laps where he's got more fuel on board. I've seen the brake wear figures over the weekend with these carbon fibre brakes which run at 700-800 degrees under braking. Over to Murray.
Yeah, I thought I saw a puff of smoke from the back of Häkkinen's McLaren there, and I remember what happened to Berger. I hope I'm wrong, but let me just throw in the red-hot Hockenheim rumour. Sitting next to me is Alain Prost, 4 times world champion, ex-Williams driver, ex-Renault driver, and the hot, very hot, I don't know whether it's true or not, obviously rumour is that Prost will be driving for McLaren in Formula 1. There's all sorts of reasons which indicate why that might be so, but what do you think, Martin?
I'd like to finish the brake story, Murray, otherwise people might be confused on half of that story. But yes, the brake wear is very, very high here, especially if you're 1 stopping. And I think Dave will have to just pay them a little bit of respect, because he's going to need those brakes at the end of the race if he ends up head-to-head with Schumacher.
So now the Benetton goes through, and Michael Schumacher on lap 25, with over half the race completed, is 18.18 seconds ahead of David Coulthard. All the drivers who are still running have made their pit stops. Michael Schumacher has been in, Coulthard has been in, Häkkinen has been in, and the race order is Schumacher, Coulthard, Häkkinen, Berger, Frentzen, Herbert.
And we saw there Michael Schumacher really sliding that Benetton, and he was doing that because he was pushing very, very hard indeed. And I just wonder whether or not Benetton are aware now that the strategy that they've adopted was a tactical strategy in terms of racing with two very similar drivers, and wasn't necessarily the fastest strategy to complete the race distance here. Now, the person that may have the fastest strategy is this man, David Coulthard. And Williams I'm sure, will have been on the radio to David Coulthard. He'll know exactly what Schumacher's situation is. They will be expecting, and he will be expecting Schumacher to come into the pits once again, whereas David Coulthard doesn't have to. So we may well see a very, very close race towards the end of this, and it just may prove that strategy in this particular odd scenario that we've got may prove Benetton and Schumacher's undoing.
Yes, I hope you're right. I hope you're right, Jonathan. I have to say, with some regret, as one of the most enthusiastic Formula One people in the world, I hope that I would like to see some more action on the track. The fuel stops were introduced in the hope of spicing things up a bit. They haven't succeeded in doing that thus far in this race. But then the great pity is that Damon Hill, after leading on that first lap, as he went into the first corner of the second lap with Schumacher about a second behind him, just completely lost the plot altogether and took all the interest about Schumacher versus Hill, the two people who are leading the World Championship, albeit with 11 points between them to Schumacher's advantage, out of the race. And now you can see the Benetton in the background behind Heinz-Harald Frentzen. And that Benetton, of course, is not Schumacher. It's Johnny Herbert, who we are riding with now. And ahead of us is the second German in the race, Schumacher being the number one, literally. And Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the navy blue Sauber Ford, turning into the stadium section, is in 5th position, with Johnny Herbert, the winner of the British Grand Prix 2 weeks ago, which moved him up into 4th position in the World Championship, starting to close, in fact closing on the Sauber. There's less than a second between them, and Johnny is lapping nearly a second faster than Frentzen, who crosses the grid now. Schumacher on lap 27 is 21 seconds ahead of Coulthard. He's lapping a second lap faster than the Williams, and basically, although we must wait and see how the pit strategy develops, looks as though he's just got to stroke the Benetton home.
Now this battle between Frentzen, or the battle that we did see, and that's one of the Ligiers, that must be Suzuki there, locking up, going straight on. Suzuki's been very prone to incidents. In fact, on the very first day of practice on Friday, he spun off the track. He then had an accident on the first day of qualifying. Look at that right front brake locking, bouncing up and down a little bit, and there he goes off onto the gravel traps. And back to the first day's qualifying, Suzuki had quite an impact with the barrier and decided, well, he found that he had double vision, and he then came back to take part in the second day's qualifying, but ultimately was delayed in doing so. But Martin, you must know the full story on this one.
Well, he'll certainly have double vision now, because that front right tyre is going to look like a 50p piece, and when you're doing 200 miles an hour with a tyre with a flat spot on it, where it's just rubbed along the ground, you really can't see where you're going. The dashboard shakes, everything shakes. In fact, he's coming in the pits. He's got a left rear puncture as well, which probably explains why he went off in the first place.
So Frentzen into the pits. That means to say that Herbert definitely moves up into 5th place. We're looking now at Gerhard Berger, who is in 4th position. That's looking from the slow motion camera point of view at how Gerhard takes the right and the left at the chicane. As you can see, just riding over the curb, gives the suspension a heck of a thump, but it just makes a marginal difference over the distance you have to go, and if you multiply that 45 times, it all helps. And of course, it enables you to get across quicker, across being the key word rather than through. Michael Schumacher.
And on that last lap, in fact, Michael Schumacher lost 0.5 of a second to David Coulthard. Coulthard is very slightly, in fact more than that, he lost over 1 second Coulthard has closed the gap. He's now 19.9 seconds behind Schumacher, and this is the gap we're going to need to monitor. And then behind Coulthard to Häkkinen, it's 13.6 seconds. But that, of course, is a rather fairer gap in a way, because those two cars are both on a one-stop strategy. But we are very sure that Schumacher is going to need to come in for a second stop, and that's going to take him at least 30 seconds. So unless Schumacher can get 30 seconds ahead, and there's that puncture on the back of Aguri Suzuki's car, and it was indeed that soft left rear tyre that let the left back of the car sag down. That lifted up the right front, and that was why the right front wheel started locking up, because it really hadn't got any load pushing it down on the ground. But Schumacher's got to pull out, I believe, at least 25, possibly 30 seconds if he's going to be able to come out of the pits after his second stop ahead of David Coulthard. Whereas Coulthard has not got to come into the pits at all, certainly not for fuel. Having said that, Schumacher's responded, and as we speak, he's now pulled back that second, and on the last lap Schumacher was 1 second quicker than David Coulthard, but he's still got to pull out some more time yet.
Lap 29 coming up to 2/3 distance in this 45 lap race. Michael Schumacher is now nearly 21 seconds ahead of David Coulthard as Greg Field in the Benetton pit lane area changes the board information, which is going to be shown to the race leader. Here he is, Schumacher 21 seconds ahead of Coulthard. Both have stopped, of course, as has Häkkinen, who is in third place. So it's a Benetton leading, a Williams second, a McLaren third. The Ferrari of Gerhard Berger is in fourth place. He's 61 seconds behind the race leader. It would have been about 41 seconds if he hadn't had, or maybe even 31, if he hadn't had that 10-second penalty. Johnny Herbert is fifth in the second Benetton, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen is sixth.
Now, from some quick calculations, I would have thought that if Schumacher, there's that left front wheel locking again, another indication of Schumacher pushing so hard. From the 8.3 seconds of fuel that Schumacher put in, that would probably be enough to do something round about 14 laps. Now, he stopped on lap 19, which should bring him to about lap 35 in this 45 lap race before he will need to come in. That's another 6 laps from where we are now, if it goes to routine, as Eddie Irvine now comes back into the pits.
You saw the board, P1 plus 21 that Schumacher saw. That is Eddie Irvine, and he's in 8th position at the present moment. As you can see, there's no question of fuel. Out he goes. Well, he was 8th when he came in.
Yes, he's running several seconds off the pace. I suspect he's either lost a gear or he's lost a couple of cylinders. I would hazard guess he's lost a gear in that gearbox.
Which won't help him any.
And that what he was doing there was coming into the pits for a quick chat with his engineer, a very brief word, more than a chat, I think, to see if there was anything that could be done. And maybe he was told, no, there's nothing we can do, just get on with it. Or the other alternative is that maybe they just tried to reprogram some of the electronics. They definitely plugged in one of their diagnostic computers there, and it may have been that they could have tried to do something about the problem with a very quick stop.
Well, while the German producer is very, very understandably concentrating on the German world champion Michael Schumacher, the crowd has gone quiet. They are sensing a victory and probably restraining their energies until Schumacher crosses the line. He's 22 seconds ahead of Coulthard now, with Häkkinen still in that third place. In fact, the battle in this race, to the extent that there is one at the moment, is between Herbert and Frentzen for 5th and 6th places, but Herbert is starting to pull away again. That is Häkkinen, who is in third place, alone on the track.
And look at that rear wing on that McLaren. It's got a black section in the middle of the field, and that looks like one of the Pacifics out. That is indeed Lavaggi. He's the new driver pulling out of the race there and into retirement. But McLaren have been playing with the levels of downforce that they need here, and although that in qualifying you need to have the car to do the optimum speed with the wings as small as possible for the highest speed at the very top end, that does allow the car to slide around, and that can lose tyre performance. And McLaren had felt before this race that they were better off running a bit more downforce, sacrificing some straight line speed to keep their tyres in better condition for a better overall race performance. And you'll see uniquely on the back of that McLaren that it has this extra mid-wing as Badoa there retires in his Minardi. That Benetton has not got a mid-wing. When you compare that to the McLaren, you'll see that the McLaren has that black section in the centre. That gives it a bit more downforce, and that will certainly potentially help the lap times. And what it won't help is the ability to overtake. And if Häkkinen does find himself in a battle with somebody, that could prove to be an interesting point.
Well, we're getting mighty thin on the ground now on lap 31 out of 45, because there are either 12 or 13 cars left in the race out of the 24 who started, depending on whether Badeur, that we saw creeping along the pit lane, was coasting in having run out of fuel, or whether he was actually out. No, he is actually out, so there are now just 13 drivers left. You saw Lavaggi go out, and it's getting very thin, but with Schumacher still there, and now 23 seconds ahead of Coulthard, who is lapping consistently slower than the Benetton in front. Things are looking increasingly good for Michael Schumacher for his first win in Germany, to increase his World Championship lead over Damon Hill, who retired on the second lap, to 21 points.
Well, Michael Schumacher, actually, that's Michael Schumacher there, and he's coming up to lap Bouillon. He's in the second of the Minardi, second of the Saubers, I beg your pardon. Johnny Herbert's got past Frentzen now, but Schumacher's still pushing really hard, and he needs to, and he's making good effect from it. He's actually pulling out about a second a lap over David Coulthard now. It's now lap 31, and the gap is 23.2 seconds. Now, if my calculations, and they're very rough calculations, are right, that means we're looking at Schumacher stopping in another 5 laps time, pulling out, and that's actually, he's pulled out another 1.8 seconds over David Coulthard at the moment. Either Coulthard's got some kind of a problem, or he's not getting through some traffic particularly well, but that's certainly a big margin indeed there. Really, the difference in fuel load should perhaps amount to around about a second a lap. But looks like Schumacher's got another 4 laps to make up another 5 seconds if he wants to have this 30-second margin to be clear. And the crucial thing is for Schumacher to get this right so that he comes out from this second pit stop ahead of David Coulthard.
Schumacher laps Jean-Christophe Bouillon, who is in 7th position in the race, and with Hill out and Alesi out, and they're 2nd and 3rd in the championship. This means to say that Schumacher, as he goes into the 10th race of the 17 race series at Hungary, is going to be a long, long way ahead of anybody in the World Championship, and looking very good indeed for his 2nd successive World Championship. We're on lap 32 now. Schumacher leads Coulthard by 25 seconds. Schumacher presumably coming in for a second stop, but should be able to get out in the lead again. Hakkinen is 3rd. Berger is in 4th position. Johnny Herbert is in 5th place as you look at David Coulthard in 2nd. And Heinz-Harald Frentzen is 6th. And everybody up to 6th position has been lapped by Michael Schumacher, the race leader.
And it's getting very, very tense indeed. Schumacher continues to pull out over David Coulthard, but it really is absolutely vital that he does so, because if Schumacher doesn't get out in front of David Coulthard, then he may have a very hard job indeed, despite having a car with fresh tyres. Because let's not forget, for these last 10 laps, if it's right that Schumacher's going to come in on lap 35 or thereabouts, for the last 10 laps, both Coulthard and Schumacher will have the same amount of fuel. The difference is that Schumacher's tyres will be in a lot better condition, because they will be effectively new, whereas David Coulthard's tyres will have done already an extra quarter of race distance. He stopped at lap 22, lap 35, an extra 13 laps, and that'll make probably about a second a lap difference to the performance. And if Schumacher gets out ahead of Coulthard for that reason, I really don't think there's going to be anything that David Coulthard can do about it.
In other words, it may well be a reprise of the British Grand Prix situation, with Damon Hill coming out after his 2nd stop and being right behind Michael Schumacher, who had stopped once.
We said earlier in the programme that Michael seemed to be driving well within himself. I really do think they had, as Jonathan said, a strategy to outpace Hill, and suddenly they were racing a different Williams on a different strategy, and now Michael's really standing on the gas. He's picked up his game, and he's making the difference, but he's really got to get another 3 or 4 seconds yet before he can come in the pits.
And when will he be doing that? Fairly shortly. 26.6 seconds was Schumacher's lead, well, at the end of the 32nd lap. He's on his 33rd now. We're expecting him to come in on the next lap, or the 35th lap, as the smoking Heinz-Harald Frentzen will soon be retiring, I suspect. In fact, he's not going any further, and he was in 6th position, which will now be taken by his teammate Jean-Christophe Bouillon, the Frenchman, who has replaced Karl Wendlinger for Monaco. in the Sauber team, and if Bouillon finishes in 6th place, that will be his first points finish in his first season of Grand Prix racing. Indeed, Martin.
And Frentzen doing exactly what he shouldn't be doing, which is wandering down the racetrack with possibly losing oil, having had to blow an engine. This is an engine designer's nightmare and dream all in one go here at Hockenheim. This is where their horsepower really does show all weekend, but then during the race, 65% full throttle during the lap. The long straights we talked about earlier on puts the massive load into the engines, and as we've seen yet again here at Hockenheim, engines braking left, right and centre.
And the Benetton mechanics are out in the pit lane, waiting, we presume, to greet the race leader, Michael Schumacher, to refuel him and to give him new tyres and wheels. And here he is on lap 34. It's not going to be very long now before he comes in, and it's getting near that. And out goes Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen, my goodness. So Frentzen out, Häkkinen out. They're dropping out like flies now, and Häkkinen was in 3rd place. Frentzen was in 6th position, and as the smoking McLaren Mercedes sits stationary beside the track, Schumacher will be coming in soon. Coulthard now 27 seconds behind him. Up to 3rd position has come Gerhard Berger, despite that 10-second penalty. Up to 4th place comes Johnny Herbert. To 5th comes Bouillon, and back to 6th place comes Eddie Irvine. And this is Michael Schumacher, race leader, in for his 2nd pit stop. Now the seconds ticking away. In goes the fuel filler. On go the new tyres and wheels. They've got time, but I'm watching all the time, and I don't see David Coulthard yet. He hasn't gone through. He's into the stadium section now. As there he is in the background, as Schumacher exits the pit lane, to the roars and huzzas of the crowd. They're going absolutely wild. They sense victory for their hero, and there is David Coulthard chasing after him. So there's very little in it now, but remember that Schumacher has got his race rhythm going. He is on new tyres, which will give him superior grip. And if the camera had stayed there just a second or so longer, you would have seen David Coulthard. The gap was 24 seconds. It's nothing like that now, and we're on lap 35 in this 45-lap race, with it all to do for both Schumacher and Coulthard. Berger up to 3rd, Herbert up to 4th, Bouillon up to 5th in only his 5th Grand Prix. Eddie Irvine is in 6th position. Katayama is in 7th place, and that is David Coulthard chasing.
And sadly, that gap between Schumacher and Coulthard is the closest it's going to be, I think, because from now on, the superior condition of those tyres from Schumacher are going to pay off, and we're going to see Coulthard gradually slip back from Michael Schumacher. But what a great shame that we didn't see Damon Hill out there battling away with his one-stop strategy, so we could see just how effective that creative Benetton strategy might have been in the racing situation that it was designed to try and succeed in. Meanwhile, Coulthard's going to be having a pretty lonely race, because behind him Gerhard Berger is now 44 seconds back, and Berger is not going to close. In fact, Berger is almost sure to fall away from David Coulthard. But also a great shame for McLaren there, because they've clearly made progress here this weekend, and very important it was to do too, because of course Mercedes is there. This is the home ground for Mercedes, and the Ilmore operation up at Brinkworth have done a great job in extracting further power. Both Blundell and Häkkinen having better specification engines here, but at least the promise has been shown. I think we shall see further advances from that team in the future. But also shame there for Jordan team, because Irvine's clearly got some, or has had some kind of a problem. But actually, having said that, his lap times have now picked up, so maybe they were able to do something by resetting the electronics. One-stop strategy there from Jordan, a two-stop one from Barrichello. They tried very hard. They were on the 3rd row of the grid, their best qualifying position ever for the Jordan team, and again a great testimony to the progress that Peugeot have made with an engine that certainly last year spent more of its time blowing up and staying in one piece. And Martin, you knew quite a bit about that, didn't you?
Well, yes, I had some bad experiences last year, but they have made fabulous improvements with the Peugeot this year. But you know, this is the toughest race of the year for the engine, and if there's any weaknesses, they're definitely going to show up here.
And there are now only 11 cars out of the 24 who started, because Damon Hill is out, Pedro Diniz is out, Taki Inui is out. That is Heinz-Harald Frentzen, incidentally. Luigi Martini, Jean Lacey, Olivier Parnis, Mark Blundell, Rubens Barrichello, Roberto Moreno, Giovanni Lavargi, Luca Bader and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. So there are now only 10 cars, and Mika Hakkinen, of course, so that means there are only 9 cars left. And it means to say too that if you finish this race, you're going to have a very good chance of being in the points, because the top 6 get points, and of those top 6 at the present moment, Michael Schumacher and Johnny Herbert are both Benetton drivers, and that means to say that Benetton are going to have both their cars finish in the points. It means to say that they're going to increase even further their Constructors' Championship lead over Ferrari, who've only got Gerhard Berger in 3rd position, with Jean Alesi long since having retired. And this is certainly going to be a Benetton race if Michael Schumacher wins it and Johnny Herbert finishes in 4th place.
The Jordan of Eddie Irvine's just gone by, and it does indeed sound rather flat, as if he's got some kind of exhaust problem or some kind of engine problem with that car. But Mark Blundell looking surprisingly cheery there for someone whose race was curtailed so early on. But Frentzen really has driven very well indeed here. Of course, the home Grand Prix is important for any driver, and Frentzen has used the increasing performance of the Sauber, but particularly a more advanced specification of Ford engine here, the Ford Zetec engine, here at Hockenheim, and qualified pretty well in 11th place, his best qualifying position for some time, and being at the head of what I term Division 3, and Division 3 is of course Sauber and Ligier and Tyrrell, and Frentzen doing very well. And in fact, Frentzen is recognised as one of the real hotshots of Formula 1. He was a teammate to Schumacher back in Mercedes-Benz sports car days, and he's recognised as being certainly very, very quick as Mika Hakkinen, maybe as quick as Michael Schumacher, but without the maturity at the moment. And he's a name that's being tipped to join a number of teams at the front. And I think if we do see any driver changes from the front-running teams, to see Frentzen in one of the leading 3 or 4 teams would be quite likely.
Schumacher about to lap Jean-Christophe Bouillon, who is in 5th place, Martin Brundle.
Yes, something Mark Blundell's just made it back to the pits, something you may not realise as Schumacher strives to become the first German to win the German Grand Prix, because there's a host of Grand Prix drivers out in the woods there somewhere, desperately trying to find their way back to the pits, and it's not that easy. It's a very big forest. Mark was probably a mile and a half from the pits. There's no signs, no roadways, and there's lots of them out there right now.
On lap 38, that is a very, very important point that Martin has just made. If Michael Schumacher wins this race, and my goodness, it looks as though he's going to, he's not going to just be the first German driver to have won the German Grand Prix since the World Championship began. He is going to be the hero of Germany even more than he is now. They've been waiting for this and longing for this. We had great Germans in the past, of course, like Rudolf Caracciola, Hermann Lang, Wolfgang von Trips, who so very nearly won the World Championship. But Michael Schumacher is the man who has brought Formula One in Germany in recent years right to the front. They were suffering, literally suffering, from the fact that they have a superb motor industry with so many great names in it, but nobody in Formula One, certainly nobody good. And then along comes Schumacher in 1991 at the behest of Eddie Jordan, gets a drive in the Belgian Grand Prix and qualifies 7th, only to retire with clutch trouble. Then Tom Walkinshaw snatches him from Eddie Jordan's grasp, and Schumacher has not looked back since with the Benetton team and is the reigning world champion. And so, as you look at the track, Tony Jardine is with Mark Blundell.
Mark Blundell, terribly hard luck, a very, very hot race. What happened?
Well, basically the engine let go on us, which is a bit unfortunate because we were going very well. We drove out to 4th position and we were quite stable. We had a one-stop strategy for the race, and I think that would have been definitely putting us in the points at the end of the race.
I know you must be disappointed about the results in the race, but you surely must be encouraged by the progress from McLaren Mercedes this weekend.
Yeah, disappointed because we've not finished this race, and it was important because of the Mercedes link here. and it's valuable points thrown away basically. But yes, encouraged because we have made progress with the engine and we've made progress with the chassis. Heads down, let's look forward to Hungary.
Just how tough was it out there with this heat? I mean, it's a race of attrition at the moment.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I mean, it's not, you know, we've got plenty of time to rest on those straights, so it's not that bad. But I'd sooner be out there working than standing here, put it that way.
Hard luck, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yes, indeed, Hockenheim is not one of the hardest drivers on in terms of physical. Sorry, one of the hardest circuits in terms of physical effort. It's very, very hard indeed on the cars. But for the drivers, for most of the time, they're sitting on the straight, watching the speed build up, and therefore it's much harder on the cars than drivers.
Now you're looking at Gerhard Berger, who is third in the Ferrari. He's very frustrated. He's had to fight his way past Ukyo Katayama, who's having a battle with Aguri Suzuki in the Ligier. That's Suzuki, who he didn't expect to be driving in this race, and he's refusing to give way to Gerhard Berger, but now does so. So Berger has fought his way past both of them. Katayama is 8th, Suzuki is in 7th place, which just goes to show that in Formula One, if you keep going, you may finish in the points. Here's a replay. You see Gerhard Berger on the left taking Ukyo Katayama, the Japanese driver in the Tyrrell Yamaha, and taking him and lapping him. Gerhard Berger is still third. He's still on the same lap as Schumacher, as is Johnny Herbert, who is in 4th place. But on lap 40, out of 45, only the first 4, Schumacher, Coulthard, Berger and Herbert, are on the same lap. But it looks as though some sort of history is going to be created here today, with Jean-Christophe Bouillon finishing 5th in only his 5th Grand Prix. Eddie Irvine in 6th position for Jordan Peugeot. That will mean 1 point for the Jordan team, and that will move them even further ahead in the Constructors' World Championship of McLaren, who are down in 5th position. But Schumacher obviously has been the man of the race. He has driven, as ever, a superb, controlled event. His team evolved a strategy which was designed to beat Damon Hill, and then Hill goes out on the second lap, so they've obviously had to think again, because then David Coulthard became the problem. He's not won anymore. This is lap 40, and he is 11 seconds behind Michael Schumacher, who is lapping a second a lap quicker than the Williams Renault. Gerhard Berger is slower than both of them. Johnny Herbert is faster in 4th place than Berger. He's 10 seconds behind the Ferrari. If he keeps up that rate, it's conceivable that he may be able to challenge for 3rd place.
Yeah, it's possible, but probably not likely. He's probably too far away. But this is interesting because we've got Jean-Christophe Bouillon in the Sauber car. He's in 5th place at the moment, being caught and about to be lapped by David Coulthard. Now, Bouillon is in fact a fellow test driver of the Williams team with Coulthard. Bouillon was actually testing for the Williams team prior to coming here, and he was saying that in fact it becomes now a little bit more of a confusion than a help, because the cars are so very different, and the lessons that he can apply from the Williams car, which has more downforce, he's quite sure of that, really can only serve to confuse him. But Bouillon running in 5th place, having his best race so far. But it's not, sadly, a great race for David Coulthard, because with Damon Hill out, this should have been a Grand Prix when Coulthard really could have done something to try and address a bit of concern that there is around, that really he's not really fulfilled the potential that he appeared to have last year. He's certainly driving well, and in qualifying here he really was in excellent form, getting within 1/10 of a second of Schumacher and within 2/10 of a second of Damon Hill. But as has happened so often this year, apart from the Argentinian Grand Prix, David has not seemed to be able to quite put in the level of performance in the race. Now, we shouldn't forget that he's still very young and he's still very inexperienced. He's nearly 10 years younger than Damon Hill, and he's still only in his 2nd year of Grand Prix racing. But nevertheless, I think many of us would love to see him just being able to turn the wick up that little bit more. He's now actually maintaining a gap of 11 seconds behind Michael Schumacher, but I suspect now that Schumacher is going to be very comfortable with a 10-second margin for the last 5 laps of this race. He won't want to push the Benetton any harder than he has to. Last year, he'll be only too well aware that he had an engine problem with his Benetton, and he'll just want to maintain around about 10 seconds. He'll probably let that gap even diminish towards the end of the race, down to about 7 seconds, just to keep it going, make no mistakes, but yet not slow up too much. If a driver backs off too much, you can lose concentration, you lose that all-important rhythm. And a driver just backing off 2 seconds a lap would reduce the average speed by only about 2 or 3 miles an hour. But to a driver, that's an enormous amount of difference, and you feel like you're virtually walking if you back off 2 seconds. So probably a second or so backing off will be all that Michael needs to do. And at the moment, that is exactly what he is doing.
Yes, and I know only too well this is a very critical time of the year for drivers. A lot of contracts expire at the end of this year, a lot of movement going to happen, and this is the time to seize the opportunity to put in some stunning drives. And I would agree, David Coulthard hasn't really shone this afternoon, and he's let Schumacher off the hook on that one. Schuey's just cruising to the end now.
Schumacher's contract is up at the end of this year. Where is he going, or is he staying with Benetton? We don't know what's going to be happening to Coulthard. Berger is rumoured to be leaving Ferrari. If Schumacher goes to Ferrari and going to McLaren or going to Williams, you can take your choice, and it probably won't be either. We don't know what's going to be happening to Johnny Herbert, because notwithstanding his British Grand Prix victory, there's some doubt about his future with Benetton. And sadly, this has not been a great German Grand Prix. We're on lap 42 out of 45. It's not been a great German Grand Prix for anybody except the man you're looking at now, and it will be a truly great Grand Prix, the greatest of his career, I'm sure, in his opinion, to win in front of his home crowd. Michael Schumacher. It's been a dreadful Grand Prix for Damon Hill. It's been a dreadful Grand Prix for Jean Alesi, for Rubens Barrichello, who is out, for Mika Hakkinen, who was hoping to do so much better in the new engined Mercedes, for his teammate Mark Blundell, to whom the same would apply. There's only 9 drivers left out of the 24 who started, as Michael Schumacher comes through to complete shortly his 42nd lap with 3 to go, leading David Coulthard by 11 seconds. Coulthard is 55 seconds ahead of Berger, who is 11 seconds ahead of 4th placed Johnny Herbert. Jean-Christophe Bouillon has been lapped in 5th place, as has 6th place Eddie Irvine. Aguri Suzuki is an unexpected and I'm sure delighted 7th in the Ligier. Ukyo Katayama is 8th. Andrea Montemini looks like finishing again for Pacific, and that will be excellent news for this very hard-trying impecunious team, and that is the lot.
One of the interesting things about Formula One and driver ratings and just who goes where and what drivers' stock values are is that really qualifying probably is more instrumental than actual race performances and race wins in determining how good the Formula One world think a driver is. And a very good example of that is the situation with Benetton, because Johnny Herbert was an exceptionally popular victor at Silverstone 2 weeks ago, but frankly I doubt that it's going to change his position a great deal. The fact that he was nearly 2 seconds off Schumacher's pace here in qualifying, despite the extra confidence that Silverstone win should have provided, that probably will count more. And now in this race, it's 45 lap race, Herbert is now 75 seconds behind Schumacher, and it's this kind of thing that really counts. Sadly, Johnny is losing out by about 1.5 seconds a lap over Schumacher, and that kind of margin between teammates is generally much more than any team would like to see, and I suspect that Benetton will be looking at someone else there to replace Johnny Herbert, although I'd much prefer to see Herbert able to up his pace, and there indeed are the Benetton team, to see Herbert up his pace and get closer to Schumacher. But as ever, it's very difficult for any driver to try and get on terms with this man. He really is recognised in Formula One now as being head and shoulders above anybody else in terms of his overall driving skills. Perhaps not quite on the level of Ayrton Senna, but not far off. And the whole driver market this year is going to stand and start on what this man decides to do. There's been a lot of rumour to the effect that Schumacher may have already signed for Ferrari. He's actually categorically denied that this weekend, but he's certainly looking at his various options. But the most important thing, I'm sure, for Schumacher is to get himself into a team and a car, or maintain himself in a team and a car that can give him the chance of winning. And Eddie Irvine, we can just see, there he is there, slowing right up. Very sad. He's driven very stoically there in 6th place, but he's obviously had some kind of problem that's beset that Jordan throughout the race, and it's finally going to put him out of the race. And that's going to mean that Aguri Suzuki, against all and every expectation, is actually going to get a point if he can manage to keep it on the road for another 2 laps, and I'm sure he will. Irvine just removing that steering wheel off his Jordan there.
Lap 44, just this one and the next one to go for Michael Schumacher. The Hockenheim Stadium here is fairly quiet at the moment, but I'll tell you, when he crosses the line at the end of the 45th lap, assuming he does so, to achieve yet another victory, which would be the 15th in his career, And this year he has already won in Brazil, in Spain, in Schumacher, in Monaco and in France. And Schumacher now is well on his way, and the place is going to absolutely erupt. There are German flags here. They've been firing rockets, as is their wont. For a lot of the practice, the authorities have been pleading with them not to do so, and I haven't actually noticed any going off during the race, but I have little doubt that a good few will be going off when Michael Schumacher completes his 45th lap to win the German Grand Prix, and he is on his 45th and final lap now.
And Schumacher has done everything right, as have done the Benetton team in this race. They've been under pressure, but they've kept cool and they've made the right decisions at the right time. It may well have been, in fact, that their two-stop strategy was something that would only have been relevant had Hill stayed in the race. But Damon Hill, it looks like, threw it away on that start of that second lap there, going off into the first corner. We'll need to find out more from the car to really know, but that looks to be the feeling at the moment. Whilst David Coulthard sadly has not realised the qualifying form of just being 2/10 away from his teammate and 1/10 away from Michael Schumacher. It should have been a much closer race for Coulthard than it has been, particularly as there can have been little wrong with the Williams strategy. But Gerhard Berger deserves a mention too, for finishing third. Certainly he's a long way behind David Coulthard, nearly a minute, but Berger did lose all of that time. He lost 50 seconds at the start and came right the way back, or perhaps 30 seconds from the jump start at least, came all the way back and has got another crucial 4 points in his championship quest.
Yes, I had dinner with Michael last night and he was supremely confident of everything around him. Didn't really talk much about the race. It just seemed he had it under control. Just wanted to talk about all sorts of other things, and even though you'd imagine on the eve of the German Grand Prix he wouldn't want to discuss such things, but he really has driven beautifully today. It's not been a great showpiece for Grand Prix motor racing, but that's the way it goes.
And Michael Schumacher is almost victoriously home. He is into the Sachs curve of the stadium. Now he comes up to the last corner but one, and then the last corner, the Sud curve. The crowd is rising, the crowd is roaring, the flags are waving to greet home their idol and their hero. Michael Schumacher, as usual, dives up to his pit to receive their applause, and he wins the German Grand Prix as David Coulthard finishes in a fine, but not quite fine enough for him, second place, just over 10 seconds behind Schumacher. Now, Schumacher could be in trouble here. He's not allowed to stop. He's not allowed to stop and take the national flag. He'll have to, because that Damon Hill, when he won the British Grand Prix, was sensible enough to keep rolling and take the Union Jack. And Schumacher appears to be overcome. He has stopped. Whether he's run out of fuel or not, I don't know, and it's totally irrelevant. And look at him. There is the hero. And there are the people who admire and venerate him. There are over 100,000 Germans here, and this is what they have waited for so long, to see a German win the German Grand Prix. It's happened here at Hockenheim as Gerhard Berger brings home, having won the race last year, his Ferrari to finish third at Hockenheim behind Schumacher and Coulthard. Johnny Herbert should be in next. Yes, indeed. I look across the stadium and I can see him. And already the thunder flashes and the rockets are going. We're waiting now as Schumacher's Benetton is being towed in. For Herbert has now finished. Bouillon has finished. Suzuki has finished. So the top six and the World Championship points scorers of the 1995 German Grand Prix were Michael Schumacher, who finished just 6 seconds ahead of Coulthard. Schumacher's last lap was 1 minute 54 seconds. That's 6 seconds slower than his own fastest lap, which he did on lap 22, just halfway through this race. And now he's going to be towed round. Now that was either a very astute move of his not to drive off with the checkered flag, or he has genuinely had some reason for stopping, like having run out of fuel. And he's being towed in. That's
A sad sight in a way, but he won't be worried because he has achieved his objective. Martin.
Yes, we sometimes do that before. It's a long slowing down lap here. It'll use a few litres of gas. It's all weight, and you don't want these.
Hold it! No, there you can see. It's Suzuki's Ligier, having finished in 6th place. It's caught fire, and he's frantically grappling with the fire extinguisher, which is a lot more interesting than seeing Schumacher's car being towed round the lap. Heinz-Harald Frentzen running in, and there's going to be a lot of fuel in that car even at the end of the race. Let's hope they get that fire out. Suzuki, having got a World Championship point for Ligier, looks as though he's going to have a very part-worn motor car at the end of it.
More to the point, Murray, that's my car and I need it for the Hungarian Grand Prix.
I was just going to ask you, Martin, if that was your motor car. But there's another one, presumably at Magny-Cours for you.
Yes, I suspect Michael's car now pick up lots and lots of rubber on its tyres. That'll make them another 2 or 3 kilos heavier, and he's using no gas to do the slowing down lap. And all of these things make sure the thing's way overweight. He may have had some other kind of problem, but anyway, he'll get back to the pits sooner or later, but it's going to be a long ride behind a breakdown track around this circuit.
And that was a scene reminiscent of Nigel Mansell carrying Ayrton Senna home. You saw Rubens Barrichello, there he is, sitting on David Coulthard's Williams Renault as David does his final lap under his own steam. And Michael Schumacher does not do his final lap under his own steam, being towed behind. I wonder if the crowd are expecting to see this, but again, he's the winner by a mere 6 seconds after 45 laps. That's more than enough, and that's put him down in the annals of history in German and World Championship motor racing as Gerhard Berger carries home. It looked like Mika Häkkinen to me. I just saw the top of his helmet and his red overalls, and Mika was certainly parked out. And as Martin Brundle has said, it's a long walk. I've walked round Hockenheim once, 4.3 miles, and I can tell you that in the sort of heat that we've been having today, it's a very tiring business. And if you've been sitting in a racing car cockpit with temperatures of about 50 degrees in all your fireproof underwear, 3-layer overalls, socks, boots, balaclava helmet, gloves and crash helmet, it's a very hot business. You're looking now at the Parc Fermé, which is where the cars go when they have finished the race for the FIA's technical delegate, the FIA being the governing body of sport, and the technical delegate is Charlie Whiting, to look at the cars and make sure that they comply with the very comprehensive regulations in every respect. I have little doubt that they will do so, because those regulations are so tough and so rigidly adhered to these days that no team is going to take a chance.
I must admit, one thing I shall be interested to hear is Michael Schumacher's comments concerning their fuel stop strategy, because I'm a little bit surprised that he wasn't able to pull out more in the early part of this race, in the early third over David Coulthard, than he did. He was only pulling out about 0.3 of a second per lap, and bearing in mind how quickly he went when he stopped for his first stop and on fresh tyres, and then in the later stages, bearing in mind how much his performance advantage was over David Coulthard, although it was admittedly helped by a better condition of tyre, it just seems slightly strange. And I just wonder, I think there's a small chance there is some kind of story, maybe the pickup of the fuel with the car, or maybe some kind of a story other than the one that we considered for Schumacher's 2-stop routine there.
Now, what about the championship situation?
We can see there just a view of Gerhard Berger now, a slow motion replay, and in fact using the curbs here is very much part of the driving technique. This circuit features this stadium section, the slow stadium section, and then these 3 long straights interrupted by curbs, and to short circuit them is really the quick way round, as long as you do it just a little bit.
with that crushing victory, Michael Schumacher has now moved 21 points ahead of Damon Hill in the World Championship. Jean Alesi is just 3 points behind Damon in third place, with Johnny Herbert on 25 points in fourth place, 31 points behind the championship leader Michael Schumacher. David Coulthard has moved ahead of Gerhard Berger thanks to that second place of his. There is Gerhard on the right talking to David Coulthard on the left, the second and third place men. And Benetton, of course, have massively increased their Constructors' Championship lead thanks to Michael Schumacher's victory and the 3 points that Johnny Herbert got for finishing in third place. It's yet again an example of having two very good drivers and what they can do for you. Even though Johnny Herbert is very much number 2 to Michael Schumacher, he got points for Benetton, and that's the important thing from the team's point of view. They now have 71 points in comparison with Ferrari, who are second on 53, Williams, who are third on 52, but Jordan got a World Championship point. No, they failed to in the end, thanks to Suzuki, and they are still fourth, however, in front of McLaren. Martin, your view?
I mean, it's sad to see Shuey on this fantastic lap of honour having to do it on the end of a tow rope. It really is sad. He must have had some kind of problem just after the finish line, but forgive me for being extremely biased, but Ligier move ahead of McLaren in the World Championship, and you wouldn't put too much money on that earlier in the year.
You are biased, and you're quite right. And I don't think Schumacher's at all comfortable, because if you look at the tow rope, which is going from the car to the roll bar of his Benetton, it's forcing his head to the left, and he's hardly able to show the real exuberance that he must be feeling, and that the crowd are obviously feeling. I agree. I don't know what the problem is or was with the Benetton, but very clearly it was something. I'm going to suspect fuel. Listen to his reception then.
Yes, I've never ever seen Schumacher look quite so delighted. We saw with his first Grand Prix win him really showing a level of jubilation and exuberance that we hadn't seen from previous Grand Prix winners like Senna and Mansell. But now, just look at them. He is absolutely ecstatic. Winning his home Grand Prix, being the first German to win a German Grand Prix, must be absolutely magnificent for him.
Yeah, and there are going to be black marks for the organisers from the FIA for this. Remember how the British used to break ranks at Silverstone, particularly when John Watson and Nigel Mansell and British drivers won. Then the same thing happened in Canada this year when Jean Alesi took victory for Ferrari, and it's happening here at Hockenheim, and I've never seen it happen here at Hockenheim before. They're swarming all over the crowd, all over the track, and the FIA said after Canada that if that happened again at a circuit, there would be draconian penalties imposed. I wouldn't like to be the person who was imposing them.
Well, certainly from what I can see, I think the spectators are all right behind the barriers and in the grandstands, and I think what we are seeing is the great deluge of photographers and media people who all want to be right alongside Schumacher to congratulate him, and marshals, of course, too, to congratulate him, and for the photographers too, to make sure that they can get those all-important first photographs.
Michael Schumacher, Schumi, as he is known to the Germans, looked at by David Coulthard and Gerhard Berger. We're between the second place man and the third place man, as an ecstatic Flavio Briatore, the boss of Benetton, and Pasquale, who is the FIA man responsible for all sorts of discipline, escort Michael Schumacher up to the podium to receive the winner's prize. And if you think you've heard a noise, I'm sure you ain't heard nothing yet, because the crowd will really go crazy when Michael comes out onto that podium, and here he is doing so, on his way to it now, with Coulthard and Gerhard Berger, and you can see how happy he is. after the German national anthem for Michael Schumacher, the national anthem for the winning British constructors team, Benetton. So history has been made today at Hockenheim with Germany's Michael Schumacher winning the German Grand Prix. From Scotland, David Coulthard takes second place, and from Austria, German-speaking Gerhard Berger, who won last year, takes third position. 3 different constructors, drivers on the podium, but very much the race for Michael Schumacher with that quite magnificent trophy. And the winner last year dropped his, so Schumacher will be very careful not to do that again this year. And now he goes to the interview room, and I'm sure there was a tear or two on his cheek as he stood and listened to the German national anthem in front of his own crowd. And Schumacher's stock will be even higher now. He has to live in Monaco to get any peace at all as it is, and probably even that won't be enough after this magnificent victory.
And I suspect that Schumacher's victory here will prove to be something of a turning point in the championship, with Hill really falling behind now. That's certainly the way that it would look from a psychological point of view, as well as the pure point situation.
Well, joy for Michael Schumacher, but utter misery for Damon Hill, who was involved in the collision with Michael at the British Grand Prix 2 weeks ago, who led the German Grand Prix from his 3rd successive pole position here today, only to lose the Williams on the 2nd lap. There he is, off it goes, over the gravel, into the tyre wall to end his race on lap 2, the beginning of, out of 45 laps. So Schumacher has got 10 points today where Damon got none. Damon got none in the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, Schumacher got none, but that will be no consolation for Damon, because this has been a very, very bitter experience for him.
And once again from that we could see that Damon Hill lost control of his Williams going into the first corner. He was doing about braking from 175 down to 150. Whether it was mechanical problem or just a driver error, we really don't know.
So a very, very happy Michael Schumacher, who has achieved an ambition for himself and for his countrymen by winning his own Grand Prix in Germany, and that's the first time that's happened.
So the German crowd got the victory they wanted as the reigning world champion Michael Schumacher claimed his 5th Grand Prix victory of the season. An impressive performance from David Coulthard, finishing 2nd, last year's winner Berger 3rd. You'll be able to hear the reaction of the top 3 drivers later on BBC 2 on Sunday Grandstand. And he has opened up a lead in the drivers' standings now of 21 points over Damon Hill, and David Coulthard has closed the gap on Johnny Herbert in 4th place. Well, you'll be able to see highlights tonight at 7:40, and the Hungarian Grand Prix is in 2 weeks' time. But over on BBC 2, the cricket, the 4th test continues, and England need 94 runs for victory. For now, though, goodbye.